Hey, Michael here from Buildistics, the show where we talk about real estate and investing. I'm here at our personal residence. This is a 1905 farmhouse, and I want to talk about some of the reasons you may not want to do a complete remodel on a house like this. So each situation is different. This is our personal residence. It's not like a rental property or anything, so we put a lot of sweat equity into it. And keep that in mind as we go through some of the reasons why you may not want to do this. One thing that is a challenge with these type of houses is the windows are often very outdated and they need to be replaced. So you end up cutting an opening that's larger or smaller, and so there's an additional cost of framing that opening as well as boxing out the window depending on your siding. This is our garage, but this is kind of an example of water intrusion that can happen on these older houses. You get water that sits on this sill and then it goes right into the wall cavity. You end up having water and mold issues in the wall cavity. So that's another thing to consider when you're looking at old houses like this. Another big issue that can happen on these old farmhouses is the foundations. Back in the day, they weren't done properly, often with very old technology, old concrete. You can see this has not been fixed yet. I plan to do that soon. But the biggest issue is not only the erosion, but also how the bones of the structure is integrated into the foundation. You've got your floor joists that come right into this concrete and stone, and then you have your wall studs that come all the way down and integrate into that. So if you've had moisture seeping into this foundation, your studs or your floor joists can potentially be all rotted out. And I experienced that with the install of the patio door. As I took out that sill plate, it was just completely rotted, including the studs that came right down into the foundation. So that's a major issue you have to take into account when you're looking at something like this. So siding is another one. You've got this old lap siding often on these farmhouses that has lead paint sometimes. And you got to mitigate that, and a lot of times it's peeling because the moisture going in and out of the building, and so that's another thing to consider. You know, we had to paint this whole entire house. Not only that, but we had to do a lot of preparation in order to get it all painted. But the other issue that I experienced as I was replacing windows and whatnot is the tar paper behind the siding, and that's supposed to act as a water barrier in case water gets behind the siding. And in this case, in this building, it was completely disintegrated. It was just dried out. On these older farmhouses, you got moisture going in and out because they're not air sealed. And so you're gonna have peeling paint and other things like that. So you gotta think about the time and effort you're gonna put into fixing the siding or replacing it. Either way you go, it's gonna be a lot of work. These are old 2x4 wall cavities. So they're not up to today's standards. And so here in the Midwest, you get the extreme temperature differences. You could have 30 below or you could have 100 degrees. It just depends on the day. And so if efficiency is a concern and you're thinking about getting a farmhouse like this and remodeling it, think about how that's going to play into your efficiency strategy. For this project, we removed the old insulation that was sagging. It was all just asbestos filled. It was nasty. And replaced it with fiberglass insulation. Not the most efficient, especially when you look at the 2x4 wall cavity. So that's something to consider. You know, you could go on the outside and add some foam insulation or do spray foam on the inside, but that's a cost versus reward situation that you have to kind of think about on these type of projects. Another thing is most of the products that are used in these old homes have asbestos or they're not the most healthy things to be around sometimes. So keep that in mind. Wear the proper PPE as much as you can to protect your lungs, and you can replace it with products that are better suited for today's energy standards. So the roofing on this project was challenging, to say the least. And if you've done a house like this, you know that these roofs are steep. And if you're doing it yourself or having friends help you like I did, keep that in mind. And the number one thing I can tell you is don't use 3-tab shingles. I'm no expert roofer, and that probably shows, but I learned that using 3-tab shingles, you know, you have to cut them a certain way so they line up. You go with the architectural series. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're better. So in any case, a lot of these farmhouses have that steep roof pitch, and that's challenging for anyone that's doing the roofing. But if you're doing it yourself, you're putting this sweat equity into the house, it's gonna be more work, it's gonna be more dangerous. You can see here, it's quite the drop from up there to down there. Thankfully, no one fell, no one got hurt, but it's just more challenging, more time consuming, not necessarily more expensive. I don't know how that relates to contractors. If they charge more for steeper roofs, maybe they do. So just keep in mind, these farmhouses typically have steeper pitch roofs. As I installed windows and doors, there's an obvious settling of the foundation, and that causes the windows and the doors to shift. And so if you're pulling out an old window, the opening may be completely out of square, so then you just have to deal with it, or put the window in a little out of plumb, but still square. So there's issues there that you have to deal with. And installing the interior doors even, you see a little bit of shift and settling over a short amount of time. So settling of doors and windows happens on these old houses. Just keep that in mind. We had to completely gut all of the electrical and plumbing. That was a huge job, and you're likely going to have to do that in a building like this because it's just so old, it's so outdated. Even if the electrical or plumbing or both have been updated, you know, in the 80s or whatnot, it probably isn't up to code. It's probably not done right. And like this project, it was a lot of redneck renovations, quite frankly. And so we had to completely gut everything and do it all over again. Something to consider because it's a big job. So these were some of the things that we learned on our project, remodeling and completely gutting this farmhouse. I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you in the next one.